Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. The show is designed to give you solutions to your day-to-day management and leadership problems. It's hosted by Matthew Haddock, a frontline manager and leader with over 25 years of experience. If you're ready, then let's get on with the show.
Welcome back to the Manager Matt podcast show. I do hope you are well and you are getting the results with your team. I'm your host, Matthew Haddock, and as ever, please share the show with other managers and leaders, because that's what this is about. It's all about having a community who we learn from each other. This podcast, if it's your first time here, will give you some real strategies for real managers, just like you. If you're running a team of 500 or 5, you're in the right place to become a more confident, prepared and effective leader. Now, today's episode is all about what-if thinking and how using scenario planning can help you and your department get ready for anything. Well, almost anything. So let's dive back in. So what do managers hate? What does your boss hate? Because that's a good way of starting it. What does your boss hate? Well, I've always hated, and I'm sure you hate too, surprises. Now, not the nice surprises, obviously, not the birthday surprises, we all like those, but the work surprises. So one thing that can really throw a wrench in anything an organisation is trying to do is when you have an unexpected problem. A supplier goes down, a competitor launches a new product from nowhere, a key team member quits on you. And then what happens? Well, what do most teams do? Well, they'll scramble round, they react, they stress out, and sometimes, unfortunately, they freeze because they don't think ahead. This is where the situation planning and the idea of what-if scenarios come in. You know, if you're not thinking ahead and looking at what could go wrong, when it does go wrong, you are going to find yourself in a real pickle, to put it lightly. Now, of course, you can't plan for everything, but there are certain things that you can use a what-if planning situational tool to go into your toolbox and use to plan ahead when things go wrong. So what is this what-if thinking? What is this magic thing you're asking about, Matt? What are you talking about? What you want to do is start to list as a group, and you can start in your own head, obviously as a manager and leader, but as a group, especially SLT, have a session where you spend time writing down what are the big what-if thinkings we should do. So let me give you some examples. What if our biggest client leaves? What if the budgets get cut? What if we grow faster than expected? Wouldn't that be nice? What if thinking is about taking the time to explore plausible futures? Now, they can be good and bad, but be aware of it though. You know, it's not doom and gloom. You know, you've got to sort of think to yourself, if it says, what if the world ends? Well, there'll be more important things than your widget production if the world is ending. You know, there is obviously the bigger things. But you start to look at this idea of not being a pessimist, but of being about resilience and flexibility. Building those flexibilities and resilience into your business. So scenario planning will be the next step after your what if. It takes it further. It structures a way of exploring the futures and asks, what would we do? What will we need? And who would we count on? This approach turns uncertainty into a strategy. So, how to scenario plan in your department? Now, of course, it's going to be specific to you because your industry is going to be specific. So you'll know exactly what those big threats are. Things like SWOT tools are really good for these. You know, you can use those ideas of, strength, weaknesses, opportunities. You can look externally when you're talking about your pastels, your political, economic, strategical, technical, governments. You can use those things as a prerequisite for this. And then what you need to do is go through scenario planning in your department. You know, actually doing it is around getting the people together and taking this idea of a theoretical exercise through some steps to make sure it can be used correctly. Now, some people use this as some people call it disaster recovery planning or business continuity, and that might make up one of your processes anyway. So somewhere in a dusty folder there'll be a plan. What happens if we flood? What happens if the wind blows the roof off? When you talk about those big ones, and those are great to keep in mind. You may have a health and safety or an environmental person who owns that, or a technical person who owns that, and that's not really the same as this. It does sort of go with it, hand in hand. But these are all about the ones that you can actually account for in a day-to-day. If your roof blows off, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. That's where those scenarios are really going to be needing someone with a lot more expert to say, this is the person you ring, this is the contact at the council, or this is the government person. Those things are done sort of that way. This is around those scenarios for your department. So you've got your team together, you've gone through the what-ifs, and then you want to look at, let's identify some of these key uncertainties. So let's look at your team or business. What are the 2 or 3 things that, if they changed suddenly, would have a major impact? So what would those examples be? So following on from what I said earlier, the things like you lose a major account. So what happens if that happens? Sales lose a major account, 50% of your work gone. What happens if your regulatory changes? So we know that we talk about future looking at regulatory, but what if someone comes along and says, all of a sudden, you can't use this? Imagine you use something in your process that you've always had there. It's a staple of it. It's the main thing that goes into it. It could be a stabiliser. It could be something chemical or something. And all of a sudden, there's a change that comes and they say, right, from now on, you can't use this. There was a certain dye that used to go into foods that made it redder. The kind of red chicken tikka. That was seen that wasn't a good thing and it was removed. So, what would that mean if it happened to you? What if your supply chain has some big delays? A few years ago, the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, not sure, a canal, let's say it that way. One leads Liverpool Canal, but a canal got blocked with a big ship, and all of a sudden, nothing could move through there. That made a massive difference in all your supply chain because you couldn't get it in, couldn't get the product in. So that's step 1 in the process, is identify key uncertainties. Step 2. Create the what-if scenario. So each of the uncertainties and turn it into a scenario. Make one moderate version and one extreme version. So what does that look like? Well, let's say, what if we lost 30% of our workforce to turnover? What would we need to do if we need to double production in 3 months? So you've got these scenarios now. So you've got these uncertainties, you've got scenarios. So you look at what happens if our supply chains get blocked, the example of the canal. So what are we going to do? We've lost 30% of our raw materials. What can we do? Then you can build mini plans around those scenarios. So for each of the scenarios, have your team brainstorm responses. What is plan A? What is plan B? What resources would we need to do this? We're not locking ourselves into any of these responses. Sometimes it can happen on the hoof, but you want to build a toolkit of options. So again, using the scenario, we've lost the raw material, 30% of raw material. What is it? What's our plan A? Well, our plan A might be we're going to carry 30% more inventory in raw materials. So we've got 3 months worth of stock. Now, that could be plan A. But when you get your financial guys in there and they say, whoa, you holding that stock's going to cost us another £1 million, that might not be the one. So plan might be plan B. We have a different supplier who comes a different route with those ones. So you're building these ones up. And it's because you're starting to think about it that you can then make a plan from the scenario to make sure that when it happens, you can click into it. And of course, a lot of them are interchanging. And because you're starting thinking around the what-ifs, it makes your team a lot more agile, a lot better at thinking around things if they go wrong. And of course, when you've done all this, you need to step 4, and that's review and revisit. So the world changes so fast, doesn't it? So you need to be putting in a review either quarterly or biannually, a time that would suit you, where you do it again and say, what is the relevance of that and what needs to change? So you've got that kind of idea as a structure in your way your SLT works. So what's the benefits you're going to see? And so, what happens when these things actually do go to plan? Well, not to plan, when something goes wrong. Well, here's what you'll start to notice. You get faster decision making in a crisis because you're used to having it. You get less panic. And that's a big thing. Less panic, a lot more stability and more action. And of course, your team feel more confident. They know that the thought is there. They know that they've done this. They become aware of how the scenarios work because you've done it a few times. And you become known as the leader who always is 2 steps ahead. Almost you've got a crystal ball and you can tell what's going to happen. And trust me, that reputation matters because when things do go wrong, they're going to turn around and say, well, what scenario planning have we got in place? How did we survive the last time? What adaptations can we make? And who led it? Of course, your name would be top of that list. Keeping it simple, it's another important thing to look at. Now, you might be overthinking it sometimes if you go too deep. You do need to have time to sit in a room and imagine these disasters, but don't let it take over your world. You've got to make sure it's simple. You should have a 15-minute team meeting at the end of your normal team meetings where you might go the what-if question. Let's pose a what-if question today. Even put in your calendar, every couple of weeks I'm going to do a what-if scenario. We're going to go away, have a bit of fun with it and come back. Remember, having that prepared curiosity makes a big difference. People will know that they've got these plans and in their mindset and their team culture, they know you're going to deal with it when it comes up. And the what if is a great challenge, even when you've got a problem that happens on the hoof. Somebody comes in one of the meetings and says, we've got this, this and this. And you go, okay, what if? What if this is not what you think it is? What if it's this? You can challenge them, gets people thinking, gets your team on the front foot, always looking at ways of getting better. Well, remember, when the enemy is not at the door is the time to be prepared. Being unprepared is the worst thing that can happen. And a what-if question can spark creativity, build readiness, and of course, eliminate surprises that we spoke around at the beginning because nobody likes surprises apart from, of course, at Christmas. But one of the big things you can do as a present to me is send me some feedback to managermattpodcast@gmail.com because I'd love to hear how you use what-if planning in your business and how you've seen the benefits in making sure you're planning ahead. And of course, you need to plan ahead for next week when you want to listen to my next podcast. But that's it from Manager Matt this week. Thank you again so much for listening and goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening to this Manager Matt podcast. We hope you found it interesting, helpful and actionable. One last thing, please leave a quick review on iTunes or with your podcast provider as it helps to spread the word of Manager Matt. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast, and if you did like anything in particular, send an email to managermattpodcast@gmail.com or visit managermatt.co.uk for more content. Feedback is a gift, so let's keep giving. See you next week.